In the last section, we got an introduction to queues. We're now going to continue by implementing a queue from scratch with JavaScript. After we do this, we'll then take a look at some different questions that are related to queues. So let's get started. Inside of my queue directory in my code editor, I'm going to open up the index.js file, and I'm going to make sure that I start up my tests as well. So over at the command line, we'll do just queue test.js watch, like so. And then we're going to have about 4 tests. So make sure you have 4 running. All right, so let's take a look at the index.js file. The description at the top pretty much mirrors everything we were just saying about queues. It is a data structure that has some methods named add and remove. If we add a record to the queue should store it until that element eventually gets removed. Now notice that we want to implement a queue as an ES2015 class. So we should be able to run some code like this right here to actually interact with it. For example, we should be able to call new queue to produce a queue. We should be able to call queue.add and then queue.remove to get back the element that we just added. So for this first data structure that we're going to work on, we're going to do this one together just to give you an idea of what a typical implementation in JavaScript of a very basic data structure like this would look like. On future ones, definitely going to let you do it on your own, but for this first one, just to make sure we're on the same page, we'll do it together. Okay, so inside the queue class right here, I'm going to give myself a little bit of space. Now the first thing that we need here is something to actually hold data inside of our queue, like something to actually hold these records in order. And so this is what I was saying before about how and why we need to use an array from JavaScript. So here's our queue class. It's what we're making right now. We are going to create an array inside the class. And the array is going to be the thing that actually does the storage of data and all that kind of good stuff. It's just up to us to implement these add and remove methods. And essentially, we're really just going to make sure that they map up to that array's unshift and pop methods. So if this seems like kind of cheating or something like that, if it seems like, why are we making a queue when we're really just working with an array here? Again, this is just what we do. Sometimes you want to have specifically something with a queue API. And so this is really not totally outside the realm of possibility. This question really makes a lot more sense if you're working with some more low-level languages where implementing a queue is kind of a necessity. Anyways, let's get to this. So back inside my code editor, we're going to first make sure that whenever we create a queue from scratch, so like use the new keyword on it, we are going to initialize an array and assign it to the instance of the queue that is created. And so the only location inside of a class that we have to run some initialization code is in the constructor method. If you haven't worked with ES2015 classes before, all you really need to know is that whenever we create a new instance of a class, if we define a function called a constructor inside of it, that constructor will automatically be called when we create a new instance. So inside this constructor, we're going to create a new array and assign it as a property to our queue instance. So I will say this.data equals empty array, like so. Now I'm totally making up the name data right here. Like this can be anything we want. It really doesn't matter. I'm just saying to store our actual data, we will assign our array to this data property. Next, we're going to add our add method. So underneath our constructor method, we'll add another method called add. Let's zoom in just a little bit, by the way. This add method will be called with some record or some piece of data that needs to be stored inside of our array. So we can refer to that simply as record. That's totally fine. And then we are going to insert this new record into the underlying array that we are pretending is our actual queue. Remember, the goal here is to make sure that we add this new piece of data in to the front of this data structure or this array right here. And so to add something into the start of an array in JavaScript, we can make use of the unshift method. So we'll say this.data.unshift and we'll pass in the record like so. As a very quick aside, just to make sure you're on the same page here with unshift, if I have an array right here and I call unshift on it, unshift, it adds that record to the very start of the array. So if I put in here like 2, 3, 4, Notice how when I unshift something, it gets added into the start. And that's exactly the behavior that we want to have with a queue. All right, so back over here, the last thing we have to do now is implement the remove method. So remember, remove should take whatever is on the opposite side, so the end of our queue, and return it. So we'll implement remove. To get the last record out of an array, we can use the pop method. So we'll say this.data.pop, and then as usual, we will be really sure that we add in the return keyword, because remove is supposed to not only remove that record from the end of the queue, but it, obviously we probably want to return it as well so we can work with that record that we just removed. All right, so let's see how our tests are doing. And yep, that's pretty much it. 4 tests passing. So does a queue feel easy to work with in JavaScript? Yes, it does. But to be honest here, we are relying upon an array for the actual data structure, and it's really the array that is doing all the heavy lifting. If we were using a much lower level language, making a queue like this would be obviously a little bit more challenging, but with JavaScript, it's pretty darn straightforward. Okay, so that's pretty much it for a queue. Again, the biggest uses of a queue is always going to be in an interview setting when your interviewer specifically says to you, use a queue to do XYZ. So let's look at a question or two that might involve a queue. So I'll catch you in the next section.